Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Dark Matter Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with an obscure university physics lecturer named Jason, who has a happy and fulfilling family life. He was quite content with how things were. That was until one day when he received a call from his old college classmate Ryan, who had just won the prestigious Pavia Prize, marking his prominence in the scientific community. Loser Jason couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. He had once been deeply accomplished in theoretical physics, but after getting married, he shifted his focus toward family life. As a result, he remained merely a university lecturer to this day. Later that evening, Jason walked into a country bar not far from home, where Ryan was hosting a party to celebrate his award. Their old classmates couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for loser Jason, who was instead the former prodigy. Only Ryan knew just how brilliant Jason really was. In fact, much of the research that led to Ryan's award-winning paper came from Jason's university notebooks. To show his gratitude, Ryan invited Jason to join the neurotechnology company he had founded, now with $100 million in funding. Jason was immediately tempted. However, when he heard the company was based in another city, he hesitated, saying he'd need to consult with his wife. Jason found himself torn between family and career, trapped in a difficult decision. Unknowingly, loser Jason wandered into a deserted alley where a masked man suddenly appeared. With a gun in hand, the man forced Jason to drive toward the suburbs and quickly snatched his phone. To Jason's shock, the man knew his phone's unlock code. After checking the messages, the robber started interrogating Jason about his life. During the back and forth, they arrived at an abandoned factory. The man ordered Jason to remove his clothes and jewelry before forcing him inside the building. Jason tried to resist, but he was quickly knocked to the ground. When a syringe was injected into his neck, he felt dizzy, but he managed to stay conscious long enough to put on the clothes the robber had brought for him. He couldn't figure out what the masked man's intentions were. Before leaving, the robber cryptically said Jason could have everything he had missed out on. Jason wanted to see the face behind the mask, but he couldn't resist the overwhelming drowsiness. When loser Jason woke up, he found himself in an unfamiliar room, still unsure of what was happening. A woman entered to flex her sexy figure, introducing herself as Amanda, his partner in a research project. Jason was completely bewildered because he had never met this woman before. Amanda assumed Jason was suffering from temporary amnesia and took him to a conference room. Through the glass door, Jason saw numerous staff members, all part of this mysterious project. He couldn't understand what the project was about, nor why everyone acted as if he'd been involved. Amanda even mentioned that Jason had been gone for 14 months and that they were eager to know where he had been. Jason touched the wound on his face, confirming that his encounter with the masked man was real. The things he was now experiencing were either an elaborate illusion or a carefully staged deception. All Jason wanted was to go home, but the person in charge insisted he undergo a full examination. Pretending to cooperate, Jason seized an opportunity and dashed towards the elevator. After finally reaching the lobby, a security guard, who seemed to recognize him, helped him bypass the access control. Jason escaped from this strange place, but his mind was far from at ease. He rushed back to his familiar home only to find Amanda waiting for him. She claimed they had been living there together all along. Loser Jason ignored her bullshitting words and anxiously called out for his wife, all the while noticing that the room looked completely different from what he remembered. Even more unsettling was the Pavia Prize trophy sitting on the shelf, awarded to him for his outstanding contributions to quantum mechanics. He tried calling his wife, but a stranger answered the phone. It seemed that loser Jason had somehow crossed into a parallel world. Meanwhile, back in Jason's original world, the masked man finally revealed his true face. He looked exactly like Jason. Now dressed in Jason's clothes, the man walked into the kitchen and lovingly embraced Jason's wife, Daniela. He said with a deep sincerity that the smartest decision he ever made was giving up research to marry her. Loser Jason felt as if he had lost something incredibly precious. In a rush, he headed to the countryside bar, thinking the bartender would surely recognize him, as just a few hours ago he'd drunk the most expensive bottle of liquor there. However, the bottle was still unopened on the shelf, and the bartender nearly threw him out, assuming he was some lunatic. Jason's mind was full of questions. He kept wondering if there really was something wrong with his memory. So he decided to visit the hospital for a brain scan. While waiting for the results, Jason noticed the ring mark on his finger, reaffirming that his memories of Daniela were real. But to his frustration, the doctor informed him that his brain showed no signs of injury. However, they did find traces of psychoactive compounds in his bloodstream. Jason immediately thought of the injection from the masked man, but had no idea how to explain it. The doctor began to go over Jason's personal history. In this world, Jason had made academic achievements and was a top physicist, having won the Pavia Prize at a young age, but he hadn't made any public appearances for over a year. Loser Jason took the tablet from the doctor and quickly closed the news article, then searched online for information about his wife, Daniela. To his surprise, she was a well-known public figure. Anxious, Jason slipped into a doctor's coat and prepared to sneak out of the hospital. At the door, he ran into a hurried woman whom he recognized as one of the lab guards, so he quickly turned his head to avoid being noticed. Once outside, Jason's first stop was the downtown art gallery. He had discovered online that Daniela was holding an exhibition there. Her accomplishments in the art world were impressive, with countless celebrities attending to support her. Loser Jason remembered how much Daniela loved painting, but in his world, she had given up the hobby shortly after they got married. He didn't have time to dwell on the reasons, because on the wall was a painting of him, created by Daniela. His heart swelled with emotion, and when he saw her in person, Jason was nearly brought to tears. But the next moment hit him like a bolt of lightning. Daniela didn't even recognize their son Charlie, and her attitude toward Jason was no more than polite friendliness, as if they were mere acquaintances. Just then, Ryan walked over, but in this world, he wasn't the Pavia Prize winner. He was just an ordinary university lecturer. Jason's mind was spinning in utter confusion. After the art show ended, the three old classmates gathered together. Daniela and Ryan were both curious, wondering where academic Jason had been for the past year. Loser Jason had no answer for that, so he started describing the life he remembered, including Ryan's success and his marriage to Daniela, along with the birth of their son. But everything changed after his encounter with the masked man. However, Daniela quickly interrupted his wet dream, saying they were just good friends here. The only thing that puzzled her was that about a year ago, Jason had shown up out of the blue and said some strange things. He claimed that their existence depended on the choices they made, and different choices created different worlds. In theory, they were all living in countless parallel worlds at the same time. He also said that the worst choice he'd ever made was related to Daniela. A chill ran down Jason's spine all the way to his smelly butt. The certainty in Daniela's voice left no doubt that she wasn't lying, but why couldn't he remember any of it? The impatient Ryan accused Jason of either playing an elaborate joke or having a mental breakdown. Frustrated, he stormed out of the room, ending the conversation. Jason, however, had a bold hypothesis. He called his colleague Amanda, who had been staying in his house, luring her away. Then he brought Daniela to his home. It was the house he and Daniela had lived in for many years, and Jason vividly remembered every detail of the decor on the walls. Yet now, everything was completely different. The two of them made their way to the study on the second floor. As Jason sifted through files, he talked about their son, Charlie, who was just like Daniela, sharing her incredible talent for painting. Daniela's eyes softened as she reminisced about the past. She finally revealed that she and Jason had been in love long ago. When she accidentally got pregnant, Jason broke up with her, claiming he was too focused on his research to start a family. Loser Jason immediately denied this, saying that when he found out Daniela was pregnant, he didn't hesitate to give up his lab work and marry her. Daniela stood there stunned, speechless for a moment before heading downstairs. Jason quickly gathered the papers on the desk and followed her to the car. Daniela said she believed Jason's version of events, but couldn't understand how there were two different versions of their lives. Jason was just as eager to figure it out. Soon, he found the answer in the notes in the study. The academic Jason in this world had built a massive iron box capable of quantum superposition, allowing humans to travel between different worlds. When Daniela became pregnant, the two Jasons had made different choices. One continued his research, while the other chose family life. This caused the two Jasons to split into their own independent universes. The academic Jason from this world, unwilling to accept his path, created the iron box and crossed into the parallel world, switching places with the loser Jason who had chosen family. This explained everything. As unbelievable as it sounded, Daniela chose to trust him completely. As they talked about their memories of married life, the conversation became more passionate. Just as they were about to embrace and ready to let go of their smelly hormones, the doorbell suddenly rang. Jason had a sinking feeling. He looked through the peephole and saw the lab guard standing outside. She shot the lock open without hesitation. Daniela started to call the police, but before she could, the guard shot her dead like a piece of soap. Helpless, Jason was also forcibly taken back to the lab. Layton, the head of the lab experiment, looked pained. He never expected things to get so out of control since he and Jason had once been like brothers. Amanda was equally frustrated. She couldn't understand how Jason, once the key figure of the experiment, had ended up on the opposing side. At that moment, a detective arrived at the lab and Layton had no choice but to deal with him. The detective was there because of Jason's disappearance. He had been missing for over a year, long enough to be reported to the police, yet had recently shown up at both the hospital and the art gallery before disappearing again. The detective wanted to know if Layton, as Jason's employer, was aware of this. Layton feigned shock, scolding Jason for not contacting him upon resurfacing, his acting worthy of an Oscar. The detective gave Layton a knowing look and mentioned that 3 employees from Layton's lab had already gone missing, promising to get to the bottom of it. After finally getting rid of the detective, Layton was seething with rage. Amanda stormed in to confront him, accusing Layton of hiring an overly aggressive guard. Daniela had simply pulled out her phone to call the police, and the guard killed her without hesitation. Although the body had been disposed of cleanly, Amanda argued that this move would irreparably alienate Jason. But Layton disagreed, believing the guard had done the right thing. Jason absolutely couldn't be exposed to the authorities, as they were already suspicious of the lab's involvement in the employee disappearances. With billions of dollars invested in this project, if the truth came out, not only would the money be lost, but Layton could also end up in prison. Amanda acknowledged that the priority now was restoring Jason's memory. Without him, their project would be impossible to complete. Coincidentally, loser Jason had also made up his mind. He wanted his memories back. This was the outcome both sides desired. Layton felt a wave of relief. His investment might just be saved after all. Loser Jason had his own plan in mind. As long as he played along and cooperated, he could not only uncover the secrets behind the quantum crossing, but also figure out what this lab was really up to. If they could kill someone without hesitation, their intentions were surely far from simple. Layton, unaware of his thoughts, personally escorted him to the core of the lab. In the center of the room stood a massive metal box. Jason had seen the relevant materials in the study, and having worked on similar models in college, he quickly explained the principles behind it. It was a device designed to exhibit quantum superposition, though due to various external interferences, the project had remained theoretical. Layton, however, insisted that Jason's memory was stuck at the time when he won the Pavia Prize because after that, academic Jason had invented a smart material capable of canceling out external radiation and sound, as well as generating its own powerful magnetic field. Loser Jason had to admire the ingenuity behind it, and without hesitation, he pushed open the door of the metal box. Amanda reminded him that he was the only one who had gone in and come out. Previously, 3 employees had volunteered for the experiment, but none of them ever returned. Since no communication devices could be installed inside, they had no idea what had happened. Jason reviewed the surveillance footage from before his disappearance, showing him calmly entering the metal box. As soon as the door closed, Amanda rushed toward it, but by the time it was opened again, the box was empty. That was, until 3 days ago, when Jason suddenly crawled out of the box after having been gone for a year. He vividly remembered waking up in the lab, and finally understood why Layton and the others had been so excited. Eager to master the technology behind the quantum crossing, loser Jason dove into the research, reviewing extensive experimental data, including the life history of the academic Jason from this world. Amanda, now feeling much more at ease, asked Jason if he really didn't remember them living together. Apparently, in this world, they had been a couple, but loser Jason felt no connection to her. Amanda didn't mind, suggesting they could get to know each other again. She revealed that she was the lab's psychologist, responsible for training the staff to manage their emotions, especially given the extreme nature of the experiments. After all, not everyone could handle suddenly vanishing into thin air. She also mentioned Jason's friend Ryan, who supplied the lab with special drugs, though only Jason himself knew their true purpose. As a psychologist, Amanda understood the symptoms of Jason's memory loss. Even without brain damage, extreme stress could sometimes trigger psychogenic amnesia. Loser Jason, instinctively reflecting on his situation, muttered that he's not really himself anymore, but rather who everyone else sees him as. Although cryptic, Amanda quickly grasped its deeper meaning, thinking that this Jason in front wasn't the same Jason after all. Meanwhile, in the other world, the academic Jason who had stayed focused on his research regretted losing the love of his life. Now, having crossed over, he finally had a second chance. He was determined to play the role of a good husband and father. However, seamlessly replacing the other Jason wouldn't be easy. He didn't even know the names of his relatives and friends. To make matters worse, his wife told him they were hosting a party at their home the next night, a plan that had been set long ago. Academic Jason pretended to suddenly remember, though internally he was a nervous wreck. But having achieved great success in his parallel world, he wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He took his son to his favorite skateboard shop, casually extracting information about the friends coming to the party. The boy, distracted by the items he loved, didn't notice the barrage of stupid questions his father was asking. When the party arrived the next day, Academic Jason confidently called everyone by name and even made a few harmless jokes. Ryan didn't suspect a thing. In fact, he thought loser Jason seemed better than ever. During dinner, Daniela asked Jason the name of the hotel they stayed at for Thanksgiving last year, a place Jason had been obsessed with at the time. Academic Jason froze for a moment, then suddenly remembered the hotel photos on his phone and lucked out by naming the correct place. Having interacted with high-profile figures in his own world, dealing with these more everyday matters was a breeze for him. Daniela was impressed with how well Jason had handled the evening, although she did notice he had become more affectionate recently. Jason had already come up with an explanation. He said that on the night of Ryan's celebration, he had almost been in a car accident. In that split second, many thoughts had flashed through his mind, and he finally realized what truly mattered to him. It's Daniela. As it turned out, no woman could resist the power of heartfelt words. While Academic Jason was enjoying his family happiness, loser Jason from the parallel universe was once again in trouble. Leighton had captured Jason's friend Ryan, and through their interrogation, it became clear that this Jason was no longer the same as before, something Jason had once confided to Ryan. When loser Jason tried to resist, the guards beat him up, leaving him bruised and battered. Leighton no longer had any reservations. He wanted to know how to find the other version of Jason, or, at the very least, learn how to use the mysterious metal box. The academic Jason had once claimed the box could unlock new worlds, and Leighton had invested heavily in the project, only for Jason to disappear without a trace, which infuriated him. Loser Jason, too, was eager to figure out how the box worked. He was desperate to return to his world and reunite with his wife. Following Leighton's orders, the guards locked Jason and Ryan in the same room. While talking, Ryan mentioned that the drugs he supplied to the lab temporarily put the prefrontal cortex into a sleep state, though he didn't know their full purpose. Loser Jason immediately connected this to the principle of the metal box, which put people in a state of quantum superposition. However, this couldn't be achieved under normal circumstances due to the observer effect, where human consciousness prevents the superposition from happening. But if the part of the brain responsible for this effect were to be sedated, the quantum superposition could be achieved. It seemed that the key to activating the metal box was injecting the drug Ryan had provided. Just as they were about to plan their next move, Leighton stormed in with the guards, needing to speak with Ryan. Alone in the room, loser Jason was preparing to lie down when Amanda burst in. She disabled all the surveillance systems and told him she wanted to help him escape. Amanda regretted sharing her theories with Leighton. Whether or not Jason was still the man she once loved, she believed he should be freed. But as they reached the hall, they ran straight into Leighton and his guards. With no way to escape, their only option was to hide inside the black metal box. The doors could only remain closed for 3 minutes before reopening on their own. In a stroke of luck, a box of Ryan's drugs was sitting in the corner. Amanda suggested activating the quantum superposition to escape. Jason, without much time to think, allowed the injection to be administered. In a haze, he saw Amanda inject herself as well. When they woke 3 minutes later, the scene around them had completely changed. On either side of them were countless iron doors, stretching out as far as the eye could see. Loser Jason guessed that this was the gateway to different parallel worlds, with each door leading to a separate universe. However, all the doors looked identical, and there was no way to tell which one led back to his original world. They opened one of the doors, stepping out into a giant metal box. Cautiously, they exited, finding what seemed to be an abandoned lab. Jason's curiosity grew, and he wondered what had happened in this world. As they wandered out of the lab, they were shocked by what they saw. Huge flakes of dust filled the air, while murky ocean water crashed against the shore. The entire world seemed cloaked in a layer of desolate sand. Before they could process what they were seeing, a distant skyscraper began to sway and then collapsed like a row of dominoes. Fortunately, they reacted quickly, diving back into the metal box just in time. Jason checked his satellite phone, confirming that their location matched the coordinates of the original metal box. The only thing that had changed was the world outside. Speaking hurriedly, the two injected themselves with another dose of the drug and returned to the interdimensional passageway. Jason wasn't ready to give up and opened another door. This time, they found themselves in a silent, lifeless forest. Deciding not to explore further, they retreated once more to the passageway. This time, Jason didn't take another dose of the drug, believing they were still within its effect window. They opened yet another door, emerging into a world scorched by a blazing sun. Amanda, intrigued by the endless corridor of doors, wondered if it had a final destination. Jason quickly stopped her, explaining that the multiverse was infinite, with every choice branching into countless possibilities. Behind any given door, there could be different versions of themselves. Despite their current dilemma, they needed food and water if they were to continue opening doors and eventually return to the world they knew. After another attempt, the scene outside the metal box resembled the setup of the Velocity Lab. As they looked on in confusion, they saw Layton and his guards chasing another version of Jason and Amanda in the distance. Before they could process what they were seeing, the female guard from Layton's team suddenly shot and killed the other Amanda. Horrified, loser Jason and Amanda quickly retreated into the metal box. Amanda soon realized that they had stumbled into a version of the world where they had failed to escape. Loser Jason stopped hesitating and continued trying to open new doors, but each time he entered a world with extremely harsh conditions. He couldn't help but wonder how the academic version of himself managed to accurately locate the target worlds. After several failed attempts, Amanda was on the verge of breaking down. In near despair, she walked into a world covered in snow and ice. Jason quickly followed, but the blizzard was so intense that their footprints soon disappeared and they couldn't find their way back. Before long, Amanda passed out from the cold, and Jason had no choice but to carry her and keep moving forward. Fortunately, they stumbled upon a small house, and he quickly brought Amanda inside. Though the house was shielded from the storm, Amanda's condition didn't improve. It wasn't until a blazing fire was lit in the fireplace that her breathing gradually stabilized. The next morning, the snow outside had piled so high that it nearly covered the roof. Loser Jason climbed out and looked around. They were in a complete world of ice and snow. To make matters worse, the metal box that led to the portal had vanished. Jason cursed the person responsible for all of this many times over. Meanwhile, the inventor of this portal technology, academic Jason, had fully embraced a laid-back lifestyle. No longer spending endless days and nights holed up in the lab, he now stayed home, enjoying the warmth of his loved ones. That day happened to be his son Charlie's 16th birthday. Jason asked him how he was feeling. Charlie replied that every birthday felt the same, but the one thing that would be different after today was that he could finally get his driver's license and no longer have to sneak around to drive. Not long after, academic Jason arrived at the classroom where he was scheduled to teach, only to find none of the students paying attention. Furious, he smashed the glass bottle he was holding, successfully getting everyone's attention. He noticed that many students hadn't even brought their textbooks or notebooks, only sitting in front of laptops playing videos. Without hesitation, he walked out. Jason, who once worked on cutting-edge research projects, felt that teaching these uninterested students was a waste of his time. He handed in his resignation to the principal and then headed to a luxurious residence of Layton, the head of the Velocity Lab. Unfortunately, in this world, Layton was just a spoiled rich kid with no ambition, and his grandfather had recently passed away, leaving Layton without a sense of purpose. Academic Jason had worked alongside Layton for many years in another world, and they had been college friends. He immediately explained why he had come. He wanted Layton to invest in his research project. Layton was initially uninterested until Jason brought him to an abandoned factory. Without revealing what his project was, Jason handed Layton a special potion to drink. Meanwhile, loser Jason in the ice world finally managed to wake Amanda. Upon learning that the metal box was buried under the snow, she deeply regretted her impulsive actions the day before. The near-death experience reminded her of a time years ago when she and her father had gone skiing and encountered a blizzard. Jason's mind raced, and he asked if she thought of that moment yesterday while she was in the corridor. Amanda admitted it, saying that the endless portal hallway had felt suffocating, like being trapped in a blizzard. Jason had a sudden realization. Those iron doors that seemed to open into random worlds might actually be shaped by their own thoughts. The worlds they encountered reflected their emotional states when they opened the doors. Yesterday, Amanda had thought of a blizzard, and that's exactly what they stepped into, while Jason, thinking about another version of himself stuck in a lab, opened a door and found exactly that. Perhaps this was the key to controlling the portal. Loser Jason became excited upon realizing that he had finally found a way home. Meanwhile, academic Jason had brought Layton to the giant metal box. The moment they stepped through the iron door, the surroundings turned into a long tunnel. Layton's eyes widened in shock, but even more surprising events awaited. Jason told him that he could show him his ideal world, but first, he needed to clear his mind of all distractions. Academic Jason knew exactly what Layton desired. As long as Layton followed him, everything would be fine. Back in the ice world, loser Jason and Amanda had left the cabin. To return to their original world, they had to find the metal box buried in the snow. With the satellite navigation down due to the extreme cold, Amanda came up with another idea. The box's coordinates were fixed, and it emitted a powerful magnetic field. Using a compass to guide them, they finally found the box buried under the thick snow and injected themselves with a special serum. They successfully reached the portal, with the path home right in front of them. Surprisingly, Jason wasn't in a rush. He glanced at his watch and, with a sense of nostalgia, remarked that today was his son's birthday. At the same time, academic Jason had led a stunned Layton out of the metal box, where Layton was reunited with his deceased grandfather in a parallel world. Jason proudly explained that he could take anyone to their ideal world. Layton quickly realized the commercial potential and was willing to pay any price to support this project. Academic Jason was still caught up in thinking that he was born to do research, unaware that his wife at home, Daniela, was heartbroken. Today wasn't just their son's birthday, it was also the anniversary of their other son's death. For the past 16 years, academic Jason had never missed a single birthday as a father. But today, he left early in the morning and hadn't returned since. What Daniela didn't know was that her real husband was in the portal, commemorating their son in his own way. Loser Jason explained to Amanda that when his wife Daniela was pregnant, the doctors had already warned them that their unborn child had a heart condition. Despite the risks, the couple decided to go ahead with the pregnancy. The child underwent several major surgeries, but tragically, they couldn't save him. Jason had never fully come to terms with this loss. He asked why academic Jason would leave his lab and go to such lengths to switch lives with him. Amanda pointed out that academic Jason was determined and deliberate in his decisions. Loser Jason was taken aback. He was just an ordinary teaching assistant with nothing to his name. Why would someone like academic Jason go through all this trouble for him? Amanda thought for a moment, then asked what he had that academic Jason didn't. Suddenly it dawned on Jason that his academic self was just after his wife and children. Meanwhile, Daniela and Charlie were still feeling the sadness of Jason's absence. Just then, the door opened and academic Jason walked in. He explained that he was late because he had been out getting a gift for Charlie. He handed over a small box, and Charlie, who had been feeling down, opened it to find car keys inside. He was so shocked that he nearly jumped out of his seat. His biggest dream was to own a car once he got his driver's license. Daniela was equally surprised because their finances weren't in a place to afford such a gift. Academic Jason came clean. He said he didn't think his life achievements should be so modest, so he had resigned from his teaching assistant job and used one of his inventions from his university days to secure an investment. He even encouraged Daniela to pick up her paintbrush again and pursue her dream of becoming a painter. Previously, loser Jason had finally figured out how to navigate the space portal. The world they entered depended on their mental state when opening the door. This time he calmed himself, thinking only of going home. But when he opened the iron door, a massive flood of seawater rushed in. It turned out that this parallel world was being ravaged by a catastrophic flood. Jason and Amanda fought desperately against the rising water as the metal box began to sink. They struggled to shut the door just as the interior filled with seawater. After barely making it back to the space portal, Jason was gasping for breath, not knowing what was wrong. Amanda suggested that the extreme pressure he was feeling might have caused the world they connected to be distorted. She advised him to rest and try again once he was in a calmer state. Amanda, ever the psychologist, always had a way of lightening the mood. As they relaxed, she wondered aloud about the volunteers who had previously participated in the metal box experiments. As they chatted, both of them drifted off to sleep. Around midnight, loser Jason woke Amanda. They hadn't eaten all day and needed to find food quickly. Opening another iron door, they found themselves in the familiar Velocity lab, though it appeared abandoned. There were no signs of people anywhere, and even the elevators weren't working. Amanda remarked that the lab would only go into lockdown if something serious had happened. They wandered into a nearby break room where it looked like someone was lying in bed. When they pulled back the covers, they were horrified to find a long dead corpse. Jason felt a deep sense of dread and was about to return to the metal box when a light flickered on at the end of the hallway. In this kind of environment, encountering another person was rarely a good sign. As the figure drew closer, Amanda's eyes widened in shock. It was her missing friend, Blair. She had volunteered for the metal box experiment and disappeared without a trace, but here she was, standing in front of them in another world. After they had eaten and rested, Blair began to recount her experiences. At first, she was just like Amanda, traveling endlessly between parallel worlds. That was until she found this world, which had been overrun by a mutated swarm of bees brought back by another version of herself. These insects had an extraordinary ability to reproduce, and with no natural predators, they quickly spread across the globe. Amanda was curious and asked why she was still here. Blair's expression darkened. She explained that she had very little of the special serum left, and the lab's remaining supply had been taken by the staff. But that wasn't the main reason. Blair had traveled through many parallel worlds, but in most of them, the other versions of herself had their own families and lives. This had left her feeling intensely lonely, as though she had been rejected by the entire universe. Blair would rather stay in this strange little room than try her luck in a new world. Amanda felt a deep sense of guilt. She regretted ever inviting Blair to participate in the metal box project and tried to convince her to leave together. But Blair refused, even warning Amanda that following Jason might not lead her to the life she truly wanted. Before they parted ways, Blair gave Amanda her notebook, filled with insights from her many travels through different worlds. She also left her with a parting piece of advice. To reach the ideal world, focus wasn't enough. Fear, distraction, and even subconscious desires could influence the outcome. Back in the portal, Amanda was overwhelmed with sadness, believing that Blair's life had been ruined by the metal box. She began to resent academic Jason, thinking that he could have returned to the original world and stopped others from entering the box, but instead, he did nothing. Loser Jason completely understood why the other version of himself had made his choices. When his girlfriend Daniela got pregnant, he had spent a long time weighing his options, ultimately choosing family over the lab. He then worked hard to be a good husband and father, hoping to prove to himself that he had made the right choice. Academic Jason, on the other hand, had chosen the lab. He too was determined to follow his path to the bitter end, but eventually realized that it wasn't worth it, so he decisively cut ties with his old world. After their conversation, Jason came up with an excellent idea for controlling the metal box. He realized that people are most focused when they are writing. Amanda suddenly understood as well. Rather than just thinking about the world they wanted to go to, they should write it down. When Jason opened the door again, the familiar setting in front of him made his heart skip a beat. This was the very place where academic Jason had kidnapped him. The memories of that event came rushing back, and loser Jason was so overwhelmed that he nearly cried. He was sure that this was his world. However, as they stepped out of the abandoned factory, they noticed that the streets were completely empty. Amanda immediately realized that they had entered another post-apocalyptic world and suggested they return to the metal box as soon as possible. But Jason was reluctant. He had finally found a world that felt so similar to his own, so he decided to check his home. They found an abandoned car at the entrance of a mall and drove home, but they didn't see a single living soul along the way. Jason grew increasingly uneasy. When he knocked on his own door, to his surprise, a response came from inside. Daniela, looking pale and exhausted, slowly opened the door. She was confused, asking if he was taken away. Jason, bewildered, stepped into the house, and that's when he learned that this world was ravaged by an unknown virus. At that moment, a group of soldiers enforcing quarantine measures appeared in the street. After confirming that Jason wasn't infected, they urged him to go home quickly. Jason, however, told them that his wife and child were infected, but the medical personnel informed him that the hospitals were already full. They handed him several vials of a drug designed to ensure that the infected could die peacefully. Amanda urged Jason to leave, warning him that getting infected would only cause more problems. But Jason stood his ground. The woman in front of him was still his wife. He looked at the family photo on the wall and began reminiscing about their past, sharing memories with her. Daniela's emotions gradually calmed, and she finally took the euthanasia drug. Jason returned to the metal box in a deep depression. The woman who had just died was exactly the same as his real wife, Daniela. Same appearance, same memories, only a different fate. Amanda began reflecting on their journey through the worlds. Jason had written on the paper that he wanted to see his family, but when he opened the door, he had still carried emotional baggage with him. It turns out his mother had died from illness, and subconsciously, he feared that his family might suffer the same fate. Jason listened thoughtfully, and when he opened the iron door once more, they finally stepped into a normal world. The surroundings were exactly as they remembered. Jason grew excited, wondering if they finally made it home. When loser Jason arrived at the familiar neighborhood, academic Jason was in the middle of a heated argument with his wife. Daniela was upset that her husband had made all these decisions without consulting her. Missing their son's birthday was bad enough, but quitting his job and buying Charlie a car without her input made things worse. She felt left out and disappointed. Meanwhile, loser Jason had already snuck into his own living room. To deal with academic Jason, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and quietly crept up to the second-floor bedroom, only to find another version of Daniela. She was extremely agitated, shouting at Jason to get out and even reaching for the phone to call the police. At that moment, their son Charlie jumped out from behind, and together, mother and son forced Jason out of the house. As the police car sped toward them, Jason told Amanda that in this world, he and Daniela had divorced, and he was now a wanted man. He couldn't openly return to the metal box anymore, so he asked Amanda to find a safe place to stay for the night. Amanda immediately thought of her mother. However, the moment her mother saw her, she backed away in fear. Amanda quickly realized why. In this world, she was already dead. Her mother's fear soon turned to relief as she began stroking Amanda's face, unable to believe her eyes. Amanda reassured her mother that she was doing fine and urged her not to worry. After a brief farewell, Amanda left with loser Jason, taking a set of car keys from the table on their way out. After experiencing this world, both Jason and Amanda began to understand Blair's perspective. Indeed, everyone in each world had their own lives, and barging in unannounced only caused endless trouble for everyone involved. Still, there were exceptions. Academic Jason had spent years planning and had successfully taken over loser Jason's life. After calming his wife down, he decided it was time to focus on his career. To ensure Leighton, his investor, was more committed, he decided to train him on how to enter the world he desired. The theory was similar to what loser Jason had figured out, focusing thoughts and emotions to control which world you enter. However, fully mastering both the conscious and subconscious mind wasn't something everyone could do. Academic Jason warned Leighton that beginners often made the mistake of entering newly split parallel worlds. Under Jason's guidance, Leighton finally reached the world he desired. But human desires are endless, and Leighton soon wanted to explore even more of his ideal worlds. Jason, however, told him it wasn't possible. The effects of the serum only had 5 minutes left, and each bottle of the serum was irreplaceable. Leighton, being a wealthy man, didn't understand the problem. He offered to buy more, at the price of $1 million per bottle. Indeed, money talks. Academic Jason immediately returned to the original world to retrieve more of the special serum. When he arrived, his former assistant quickly filled him in on what had been happening. Amanda and the other Jason had entered the metal box, and even Leighton had followed them. Upon hearing this, academic Jason made a sudden decision. He would seal off the metal box in this world. This way, loser Jason would never be able to return, and he could live out the rest of his life with Daniela. Both versions of Jason were extreme in their own ways. Whether they chose career or family, each wanted to succeed at all costs. Yet both struggled with doubts and regrets about their past choices, a reminder that human desires are indeed boundless. The scene shifts to loser Jason furiously documenting every detail he could remember, hoping to accurately pinpoint his original world. But each time he opened a door, disappointment followed. Either the front door of the house was the wrong color, or his beloved wife was already married to someone else. Though he came close, Jason knew that none of these were his world. Amanda suggested Jason take a day off to rest. They found a fancy restaurant and indulged in a delicious meal, slowly calming their restless hearts. Amanda mentioned that in this world, she wasn't a psychologist but a restaurant manager. Jason was baffled. How could two versions of Amanda, born under the same circumstances, lead such different lives? As a psychologist, Amanda had the perfect explanation. While personality is largely set by the age of 3, it is a natural response to specific environments. Different choices shape different environments, and as those environments shift, so too can a person's character. For example, academic Jason struggled with controlling his temper, whereas loser Jason was more empathetic and better at managing his impulses. Jason credited his more compassionate nature to his loving and gentle wife, admitting that brief moments of happiness were the only way to forget his current troubles. Back at the hotel, the two lay on the same bed, ready for a tongue massage. Jason remarked that today had been the most fulfilling day he'd had in a long time, though his own world seemed to be slipping further out of reach. Amanda, aware that Jason was still thinking about his wife, quietly moved to another room. Jason didn't know it yet, but he might never return to his world. Turning to academic Jason, he plans to completely seal off the export of this world's iron box. So he prepares a box of special potions for investor Leighton, hoping that Leighton can find the perfect world in his heart. The two part ways with a casual wave, and with the huge sum of money, Jason once again encourages his wife to become a full-time painter. Previously, Daniela had been worried about the family's financial situation, but now that her husband has secured significant investment, she is indeed feeling a bit tempted. As evening approached, Jason took his son home after a day out, noticing that the boy seemed tired. He handed Charlie some ice cream he had bought earlier, but after just a few bites, Charlie started convulsing violently. Despite quickly administering medication, Charlie still had to stay in the hospital for observation. Daniela rushed into the hospital, furious, and confronted Jason about why he gave him the nut-flavored ice cream since Charlie's been allergic to nuts his whole life. Jason's worst fears were coming true. Although he looked exactly like the original Jason, he was still an imposter, and the 15 years of family history were hard to catch up on in a short time. To make matters worse, Daniela was an observant woman. She had noticed that Jason had never used dental floss before, yet here he was, suddenly concerned about his gum health. Academic Jason could only offer a weak explanation, saying he had recently started paying more attention to his teeth. Daniela grew increasingly suspicious. She confided in her best friend, saying Jason had changed too much, not just in his daily habits, but in his fashion sense and career goals as well. What really concerned her was that during their time at the hospital, she saw needle marks on Jason's arm, and he had been leaving the house late at night more often. Daniela decided to confront Jason soon, but her friend advised caution. She warned her not to tip him off before she found out the truth quietly. Meanwhile, Jason sensed his wife's growing mistrust. He sought out Amanda, who, in this world, ran a psychology clinic instead of working at the Velocity Lab. After listening to Jason's story, Amanda bluntly pointed out that he was a perfectionist and that deep down, he wasn't satisfied with his wife. Jason stubbornly denied this and decided to stage a romantic gesture to improve his relationship. Amanda warned him that what he considered romantic might not be what his wife wanted, but Jason didn't take her seriously. Back home, he picked out a beautiful dress for Daniela and, after blindfolding her, took her to an art gallery. As they walked through the bustling crowd, Daniela suddenly spotted her own painting prominently displayed on the wall. Her expression changed instantly. Jason had planned the whole thing as a surprise, but it turned into a disaster. Daniela was embarrassed. She had painted that piece out of boredom at home, and it was never meant for public display. Even the dress Jason had chosen for her was something she disliked. She didn't want her husband making decisions on her behalf. Jason was confused, feeling that their lack of harmony was the result of not having spent enough time together. He didn't follow Daniela home that night. Instead, he drove off alone. Remembering her friend's advice, Daniela quietly followed Jason in her car. She watched as he entered a storage unit, stayed inside for a short while, and then quickly left. Curious about what was inside, she peered through the gap in the door and managed to pull out an empty vial with an iron rod. Recalling the needle marks on Jason's arm, she immediately contacted Ryan, a former classmate who was skilled in biological research. Daniela asked him to analyze the remnants of the drug in the vial. After some thought, Ryan agreed to help. At the same time, loser Jason and Amanda had once again traveled to a parallel world. This time, Amanda seemed tired and suggested they split up to explore on their own, planning to meet back up the following evening. Early the next morning, Jason went to Daniela's workplace. Although she was right in front of him, her hairstyle was clearly not the same as the Daniela he knew. Still, Jason felt an urge to talk to her, so he suggested they grab a coffee after work. To his surprise, she hesitated for just a moment before declining. Meanwhile, Amanda watched from a distance, observing the life of another version of herself. This Amanda had a happy, loving family. When Amanda returned to the location of the metal box, Jason was already waiting, looking as though his day hadn't gone well either. They checked into a hotel together, and Jason admitted that he had followed Daniela the entire day. She had gone out with the other Jason, eating and watching a Daniel C.C. horror movie together. For the first time, Jason truly understood how his academic self must have felt when he was secretly watching him. Jason's determination reignited. He was more driven than ever to find his true world. But Amanda shook her head, saying that the world he's looking for is like a grain of sand on a beach. Loser Jason had been to countless worlds by now. He'd seen his wife murdered, he'd seen her die of illness, and his mind was struggling to bear the weight of it all. And with only 10 vials of the special serum left, their margin for error was shrinking fast. Sensing Jason's discouragement, Amanda quickly encouraged him, saying they couldn't give up hope, but they did need to try a new approach. At the same time, academic Jason was undergoing his own therapy session with Amanda. The failure of his surprise plan had hit him hard. He had worked so hard to get to this point, only to have everything go so wrong. He even felt the urge to walk away from it all. He admitted that he had many options. Life ahead of him felt like a hallway lined with doors. He could open any one of them and live a different life. Amanda found the metaphor intriguing and astutely pointed out that maybe the place where he felt most comfortable isn't any of the worlds behind those doors, but rather the hallway itself, with all its infinite possibilities. Jason seemed deep in thought after hearing this. When he got home, Jason unexpectedly ran into Ryan, who pulled out the analyzed vial and angrily accused Jason of being a thief. The serum, it turned out, had the same composition as the drug Ryan had been developing. Of course, Jason wasn't about to tell him that it was a version of Ryan from another world who had provided the serum for interdimensional travel. Instead, he asked Ryan where he got that vial. When Ryan refused to answer, Jason changed tactics, asking what his drug was used to do. Ryan looked uncomfortable and explained that the drug was meant to induce total body anesthesia. It worked by hypnotizing the brain. Jason, however, was beaming with pride. He invited Ryan to see how he used the serum and took him to the abandoned factory. After injecting the serum, the inside of the metal box immediately transformed into the dimensional hallway. Ryan quickly grasped the concept, realizing it was a 5-dimensional space created by quantum superposition. He had never imagined his drug could be used this way. Academic Jason then urged Ryan to clear his mind, promising him something even more astonishing. He gently opened the door beside him, revealing a vibrant, futuristic world. It was a perfect world, custom-made for Ryan, who was completely awestruck by the sight. Jason, seizing Ryan's phone, prepared to take a photo to mark the occasion, but as he did, he found himself drifting closer to the metal box. Ryan suddenly realized the truth. This Jason wasn't the one he knew. But it was too late. Jason shut the door, leaving Ryan trapped in that world forever. Upon returning, Jason saw that Daniela was calling Ryan's phone. Instantly, he deduced that the test vial had been sent to Ryan by his wife. Feeling a mounting sense of danger, academic Jason immediately called in a construction crew to seal off the metal box with concrete, making sure no one could ever disrupt his life again. Amanda's earlier observation had proven correct. Academic Jason was impulsive, controlling, and obsessed with maintaining power. Sealing off the door may have served 2 purposes: to prevent the original Jason from returning, and to counter Amanda's claim that what he loved most was the hallway of possibilities. By sealing the exit, academic Jason had effectively cut off his own retreat. But his actions didn't just fail to stop loser Jason's return, they created an opportunity for it. Amanda suggested a new way of thinking. Rather than focusing on the world Jason most wanted to go to, they should aim for the one academic Jason most wanted to avoid. She believed that would lead them to success. The concrete barrier sealing off the metal box wasn't a real concern. After all, the door opened inward, not outward. The very fact that the door was sealed meant that someone didn't want loser Jason entering this world, but he could think of 1,000 ways to break through the concrete. When Amanda pushed open the heavy door, they were greeted by a world of blue skies and green fields. The streets were pristine, untouched by the ravages of modern industry, and every balcony was adorned with plants. This was the kind of environment humans were meant to live in. From passers-by, they learned that this world had mastered cold atom fusion, enabling the creation of clean, unlimited energy. Amanda shared her experience from traveling through worlds. She had felt that Jason was exhausted and in need of a proper rest. She had advised him to clear his mind and let go of all thoughts. After doing so, Amanda had pushed open the door and found this perfect world. When Amanda opened the door, she didn't visualize anything specific in her mind. Instead, she relied on a basic human instinct, a desire for a clean and safe technological world. This approach gave Jason a new perspective. Amanda had taken a different path, focusing on human traits rather than specific objects. The two of them found a bar and started drinking. The bartender mentioned that the Cloud Tower was a popular spot for visitors, and Amanda immediately grabbed her backpack, saying she had something to take care of. She arranged to meet Jason at Cloud Tower in 2 hours before mysteriously disappearing. While waiting, 2 men approached Jason, asking him to take their picture. They showed him a previously snapped photo of him and Amanda, both smiling joyfully. About 2 hours later, Jason arrived at the famous Cloud Tower, took the elevator to the top floor, and gazed out through the floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling like he was floating in the clouds. Amanda had already secured a table and was waiting for him. She had even bought him a suit, transforming him from a scruffy man into a sharp-looking guy. In the past 2 hours, Amanda had already gathered all the information she needed. In this world, Jason was an insurance salesman, and Amanda had disappeared 2 years ago. She saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and decided to stay in this world for good. The unspoken truth between them was that Jason had been searching for his home all along, and once he found it, Amanda would be left alone. She figured it was better to settle now in this perfect world where she could live as herself. Jason was filled with sadness, but knew this was the best choice for Amanda. To his surprise, Amanda added that she hoped Jason would stay in this world too. Jason thought for a long while, but ultimately shook his head. He pulled 2 vials of serum from his bag, offering them to Amanda in case she ever regretted her decision, giving her a chance to travel again. Amanda firmly declined. She said she never regretted her choices. Reluctantly, Jason stood up. As they hugged, he secretly slipped one of the vials into Amanda's handbag before walking out of the restaurant. Amanda stood alone in the elevator, her face full of pain and sorrow. But as the elevator passed through the clouds and sunlight poured back in, she pulled herself together and resolved to embrace her new life. Meanwhile, Jason returned to the metal box. Only 3 vials of the special serum remained. Without hesitation, he initiated another journey home. But this time, he arrived in a desolate, ruined world, just like the shattered state of his emotions. He tried to clear his mind and used another vial, but once again it wasn't his world. Jason dialed his wife's number, knowing that his opportunities were running out. Even just hearing her voice would be good. She didn't seem to notice anything unusual. After hastily hanging up, Jason felt a slight comfort in his lonely heart. Passing by a shop, he caught sight of a familiar mask. It was the very mask worn by academic Jason when he had kidnapped him. Feeling a spark of hope, Jason waited until late at night to quietly sneak into his house. In the bedroom, he saw his wife asleep next to another version of himself. His emotions were a whirlwind. He briefly considered following in academic Jason's footsteps, kidnapping the other version of himself and taking his place. But a voice inside told him not to. Suddenly, the kitchen light flicked on. Jason thought it was his son, but instead, it was the other son who had died of a heart condition. Jason was shocked. He longed to embrace his late son, only to learn that he was burdened with guilt over receiving a stranger's heart in a transplant. With a heavy heart, Jason abandoned his plan to take over this version of his life. Instead, he sought out his friend Ryan, hoping to get more serum for another chance to travel. However, this world's Ryan was just a regular car mechanic. After being caught for drunk driving upon graduating from college, his life had taken a completely different path. Now, with only 1 vial of serum left, Jason stood at a crossroads, unsure of what to do next. In another world, academic Jason was also in deep turmoil. He had sealed the portal exit with concrete, thinking it would solve his problems once and for all, but it only brought him bigger issues. First, Daniela had begun to sense something was wrong. 5 days earlier, she had asked Ryan to analyze the contents of the vial, but Ryan had seemingly vanished into thin air. Of course, Jason wasn't about to explain that he had left Ryan stranded in another parallel world. Things escalated when the detective showed up at his door. Ryan's girlfriend had reported him missing, and he had been gone for 3 days. Daniela, not wanting to hide anything, said the last time she saw Ryan was 5 days ago at their apartment. Jason, however, claimed he had seen Ryan at a bar 3 days ago, where Ryan seemed troubled and had been drinking heavily. The detective smiled slyly, assuring them that she would investigate further. After the detective left, Daniela confronted Jason, demanding to know what was really inside the vial. Academic Jason had anticipated this moment, but when his wife admitted that she had been following him, he couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. Still, he kept his composure and explained that it was a psychoactive drug for one of his research projects. He had kept it from her because he didn't want to worry her. Although the conversation ended on the surface with a sense of reconciliation, Jason felt like he had failed. In his mind, Daniela was supposed to be successful and open with him about everything. Later, when he spoke to Amanda, Jason confessed openly that he wanted to abandon everything and leave this world behind. When Jason returned home, burdened by his thoughts, he encountered the detective once again, who had tracked Ryan's phone, and the last signal came from an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. With a pointed look, the detective asked if he was with Ryan then. When Jason shook his head, the detective hinted that she would check the surveillance footage. Jason panicked, realizing it would soon be impossible to keep Ryan's disappearance hidden. Desperate, Jason went to the sealed metal box and raised a pickaxe, smashing it into the concrete. Instead of fleeing, he returned to the parallel world where he had abandoned Ryan and brought his barely conscious friend back. This way, at least, he wouldn't face kidnapping charges, and he couldn't bear to lose the life he had built with Daniela. Meanwhile, in yet another world, the loser version of Jason had decided it was time for one last all-or-nothing attempt. He planned to use his final vial of serum. Thinking back to Amanda's advice, he stopped focusing on specific things and instead reflected on his memories with Daniela, how they first met, their marriage, and the birth of their children. Although he envied this world's Jason, who not only had Daniela, but also their second son still alive, he had resolved not to steal someone else's life. He wanted his own life. Jason opened the iron door once more and found himself staring at a thick concrete wall with a hole broken through it. As he stepped forward, he spotted a shattered vial on the ground. His hands trembled. Without hesitation, he ran to the familiar countryside bar, where the bartender immediately recognized him. Jason's heart filled with certainty. It turns out this was the world he had been searching for all along. Loser Jason couldn't wait to rush back to his familiar neighborhood. When he saw the familiar front door, he was overwhelmed with emotion, on the verge of tears. For an entire month, he had traveled through countless parallel worlds, experiencing disappointment and pain time and again. He had risked everything, and now, at long last, he was back in his own world. Jason didn't want to cause a scene. From a distance, he watched his wife and child, the ones he had longed to see. Just as he was about to approach them, academic Jason suddenly returned home. Loser Jason overheard their conversation and realized that missing Ryan had been found and was now resting at home. Jason quickly understood that before he could reunite with his family, he had one major obstacle to deal with. He headed to a nearby store, intending to buy a handgun to drive out the intruder in his home. But the shopkeeper refused to sell it to him without a gun license, so Jason settled for a knife and pepper spray. Just after he left, another Jason walked into the store, also looking to buy a gun. The shopkeeper, confused, asked if he had just been here. That's when this Jason realized there was another version of himself on the loose. The shopkeeper noted the only difference was that the other Jason didn't have a string around his hand. Jason ran out of the store, but his other self had already disappeared into the busy streets. Loser Jason finally returned to his own world, but this didn't mean his journey was over. He now had to face the ruthless academic Jason. However, it's heavily implied that the final appearance was of a new version of Jason. Earlier in the series, when the protagonist first traveled, he wore a string around his hand as a symbol of his missing wedding ring. The Jason who appeared at the end wore neither the wedding ring nor the string, suggesting that he was another splintered version created after the abduction. This version also seems obsessed with finding his wife, though his journey has clearly been different from Loser Jason's. But for Daniela, the original wife, every version of Jason that splintered after the kidnapping is essentially the same person. In earlier episodes, Amanda's friend Blair encountered a similar situation when she met another version of herself in a parallel world. In short, the Jason we've been following all along is just one of countless Jasons who split off after the kidnapping, a disturbing revelation that leaves much to think about. Returning to the story, Loser Jason, who saw his counterpart with a black ring, realized that their experiences were almost identical up until they escaped from the Velocity Lab with Amanda's help. The difference came when they each made different choices in the metal box, with each decision spawning another version of Jason. This process repeated endlessly, creating countless Jasons. Though many Jasons died or ran out of the special serum, the fact remained that this world was the end point for every Jason. Even if only 1% of Jasons succeeded, the sheer number of them was staggering. The two Jasons, sensing the gravity of the situation, dropped the topic. They shifted the conversation to Amanda. Loser Jason explained that the Amanda he knew had stayed behind in a relatively perfect world. The scarred Jason across from him, however, hadn't been so lucky. He and his Amanda had gone through a dark world where she had died, and he himself had barely survived, his wounds still unhealed. The scarred Jason suggested they team up to kill the evil academic Jason, even revealing that he had already dug a grave in the countryside. But loser Jason recognized a harsh truth. In this world, there was only one Daniela. For any version of Jason to reclaim his life, he would have to eliminate all the others. Collaboration was simply not an option, and so the conversation ended on a sour note, with the two parting ways. Meanwhile, academic Jason returned home, where his son told him that Daniela had gone to Ryan's house because something had happened there. Jason panicked because he had brought Ryan back into this world just yesterday, so something might have gone wrong. As he went outside to take out the trash, a figure suddenly lunged at him from the shadows, holding a knife, clearly intent on harm. Academic Jason fought back fiercely and managed to kill the attacker, only to realize that it was another version of himself. He dragged the body into the garage, planning to wrap it up and dispose of it later, but his son interrupted him. Forced to pretend nothing had happened, he decided to deal with it tomorrow. But as he lay in bed, sleep eluded him. As the inventor of the metal box, he knew that as long as one Jason appeared, countless more would soon follow. Beside him, his wife Daniela was also unable to sleep. When she had visited her friend Ryan recently, he had seemed like a different person. He didn't even recognize her. Ryan had mentioned that while working at the auto shop the night before, a kind stranger had bought him a drink, and when he woke up, he found himself in his current state. Daniela had shown Ryan a photo of Jason, and Ryan had immediately recognized him as the man who had bought him the drink. Daniela hadn't pieced it all together yet, but Jason knew she was getting close. She didn't yet know that Jason had snatched Orion from another world to cover his tracks, but she was certain something was wrong with her husband. Meanwhile, loser Jason woke up on a park bench, a new plan forming in his mind to defeat his rivals. He walked into a cafe and, without a care for anyone around him, lit a cigar he had prepared. Though the staff and customers expressed their disapproval, Jason ignored them. Only when the police arrived in response to complaints did he stop, allowing himself to be taken to the police station. Back at home, Daniela had finished getting ready for the day. She asked Jason if she could borrow the car, but he made excuses, so she ended up taking a cab to the storage unit he had been renting. She forced the lock open and immediately noticed a phone on the table filled with photos of Jason. In the corner, she found a box containing special serum and Ryan's jacket, confirming her suspicions that Ryan's disappearance was definitely linked to Jason. As she was processing this, her phone rang. It was the police. At the same time, academic Jason was giving his son a tour of the university where he had once studied and met Daniela. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a familiar figure. Quickly, he pulled his son toward the library, hoping to escape. He couldn't believe it since he had just dealt with one version of Jason, and now another had appeared. Jason tried to lose him in the crowd, but the other Jason kept following. Jason told his son to leave and meet him at the back gate, then ran toward the rooftop, where it was less crowded. But this Jason was more persistent than expected. Desperate, academic Jason doubled back and launched a surprise attack. The black ring on the other Jason's finger confirmed he was the one who had met loser Jason. Wounded and weakened, the Black Ring Jason was no match for academic Jason, who quickly strangled him to death. Exhausted from having killed two of his copies in quick succession, academic Jason locked the body in a closet. Afterwards, Jason ran outside and found his son being questioned by the police for parking violations. After quickly explaining the situation, Jason managed to get them out of there. At the police station, loser Jason signed some paperwork and was finally released, only to see his wife waiting to bail him out. She looked distant, and Jason hurried to explain, telling her he had gotten himself arrested on purpose just to have a private conversation with her. He reminded her of the last time they saw each other, at a small country bar where they had celebrated Ryan's birthday. Daniela assumed Jason was making up stories again, but he quickly told her everything about the metal box, how academic Jason had stolen his life, and how he had been forced to fight back. Seeing her confusion, Jason offered a way to prove it. He told Daniela to call her current husband. Skeptical but curious, she dialed the number, and sure enough, her husband's voice answered on the other end. Daniela's eyes widened in shock. Jason urged her to suggest to her husband that they visit Reef Island, where they had supposedly spent Christmas together last year. Although Daniela knew they hadn't spent Christmas there, she repeated Jason's words verbatim. To her astonishment, her husband on the phone agreed and even commented on how beautiful the scenery was. Daniela looked at the man in front of her, still unable to fully grasp the truth. All she wanted now was to go find her son. Jason understood, but to prevent another version of himself from interfering, they agreed on a secret meeting place and code for their next encounter. When Daniela returned home, she immediately sensed that something was off. The bed was covered in a mess of clothes, suggesting that academic Jason was clearly planning to leave, confirming her suspicions that he was an imposter, and now it seemed he was trying to run away. As Daniela was about to warn her son, Jason interrupted them, insisting she pack their things and promising to explain on the way. Pretending to comply, Daniela discreetly texted Charlie to tell him to get out, but he wasn't checking his phone. Desperate, Daniela asked Jason to help her retrieve something from the basement. When his back was turned, she shoved him inside and locked the door. Rushing out with Charlie, they sped off in their car, only to run into another Jason, who quickly got in. As he began talking to Daniela about being replaced, her heart sank. This wasn't the original loser Jason either. Just as she yelled for him to stop the car, another vehicle suddenly swerved in front of them. Thankfully, neither Daniela nor Charlie was hurt. After stepping out of the car, Daniela noticed that another Jason was sitting in the other vehicle involved in the accident. Panic rising, they rushed to the subway station, where loser Jason was already waiting. He verified their secret code and, at last, the family was reunited. The scene shifts to loser Jason and his family immediately fleeing the city after their reunion. Daniela and Charlie's phones kept buzzing with messages from other versions of Jason, all claiming to be the real one who loved her. Without hesitation, Daniela turned off her phone. All she wanted was some peace, and Jason hadn't anticipated this chaotic situation either. He didn't even know where to go, as any plan he came up with would likely be guessed by another Jason. Then Charlie had an idea. He led his parents to a secluded beach house belonging to one of his classmates. It was rarely used, and Charlie had snuck there a few times during the summer. He figured it was a perfect hideout where no one could find them. After the exhausting escape, the family finally had a moment to sit and talk. Daniela's emotions were in turmoil. She had always wanted to return to the life they once had, but now she had to face the reality of so many Jasons. Jason brought up their other son, who had passed away, and reassured Daniela that no matter what challenges they faced, they could overcome them together. After she fell asleep, Jason opened his laptop and discovered a message board filled with hundreds of Jasons discussing what to do. The peaceful faction suggested co-parenting with Daniela and Charlie, while the more aggressive group wanted to eliminate all other versions of Jason until only one was left to be with Daniela. Loser Jason's heart sank since the situation was far worse than he'd imagined. Even this quiet beach house didn't feel safe anymore. Gripping an iron rod, he sat in the hallway all night, keeping watch. The next morning, Jason brought coffee to Daniela, who began to open up about her recent experiences. Although academic Jason's actions initially reminded her of their early romantic days, he wasn't her real husband. Jason, filled with guilt, confessed that he often wondered what life would have been like if he had made different choices. It seemed that academic Jason had similar thoughts and took action, which led to all their current problems. Daniela smiled, recognizing the kind and humble man she had once fallen in love with. Jason then explained their current predicament. Hundreds of Jasons were tracking them down, and some were willing to resort to violence. Daniela gasped, unable to imagine the nightmare that lay ahead. Meanwhile, academic Jason, who had been pushed down the stairs by Daniela, woke up from his unconscious state, only to see another version of himself, the hat-wearing Jason, walking toward him. Having gone through his share of hardships, this Jason was more aggressive than expected. He unleashed his rage on academic Jason, beating him badly. Once his frustration was out, he began trying to track down Daniela. Unfortunately, her phone was untraceable, and there were no records of recent transactions. Frustrated, hat-wearing Jason demanded academic Jason hand over his phone. Sure enough, there was a key clue. Daniela's friend Blair had texted Jason, asking when he planned to return her car. It turned out the vehicle Daniela and her family used to escape had been borrowed from Blair. Seizing the opportunity, hat-wearing Jason replied, telling Blair to come by the house. As academic Jason, now bound and helpless, asked what happened to him, hat-wearing Jason grew furious again. He explained that in his world, Daniela had died, his friend Ryan was killed by Leighton, and Amanda had helped him escape through the metal box. But after that, both of them were gripped with fear and despair, and the parallel worlds they encountered were equally grim. On the sixth door they opened, they entered a charred forest. Amanda, distracted for a moment, was crushed by a falling tree. Hat-wearing Jason blamed academic Jason for all the death and suffering he'd caused. Seeing academic Jason's regret, hat-wearing Jason pulled up the email inbox on his laptop, showing him how hundreds of other Jasons were plotting to win over Daniela. For the first time, academic Jason began to feel real remorse. This was not the life he had wanted. Not long after, Blair entered the house, noticing bloodstains on the floor. A sense of dread crept over her as she cautiously searched the rooms. Finally, in the upstairs bedroom, she found the bound academic Jason. But before she could react, hat-wearing Jason leaped out from behind the door. He wasn't trying to harm her. He only wanted Blair to track her vehicle, hoping it would lead him to Daniela's location. Blair tried to escape, but Jason had a gun. She pretended to reach for her phone, but pulled out pepper spray instead, quickly turning the tables. At this point, Daniela was beginning to feel a little more like her old self. Early that morning, loser Jason made Daniela her favorite pine nut pancakes. As they ate, he remarked how the imposter didn't even know about Charlie's allergies and had missed the memorial for their other child. Jason cursed the imposter as a complete fraud. Those were hardships they had endured together. No one else could just step in and take his place. After the warm breakfast, Daniela felt much more at ease and jokingly asked when Jason planned to return Blair's car. Jason was considering the same thing. They needed to find a truly safe place to go. He even thought about going to another parallel world, but they were out of serum for the metal box. The mention of this piqued Daniela's curiosity. Jason explained they were like little fish in a pond. When someone scoops you out, you realize what you thought was the whole world is just one of many ponds. Daniela, knowing Jason had been through so much, asked if there was any world he had wanted to stay in. Jason thought of the kind-hearted Amanda and admitted that there was one, but he left because it wasn't what he truly wanted. Daniela understood Jason's feelings, and the two embraced without a smelly hormone yoga session, finally mending the emotional distance that had grown between them over the past few months. Later, while Jason rested, Daniela secretly used his laptop to send an email. In the message, she declared her decision. No matter what the other Jasons tried, she would only choose the Jason who was now by her side. Late at night, as Jason prepared for his usual patrol, he noticed a shadow flicker outside the window. His heart sank. Rushing into the yard, he found another version of Jason lying on the ground. Before he could react, a gunshot rang out, and yet another Jason fell behind him. The others had finally caught up. Loser Jason bolted back inside, urging Daniela to call Charlie, but another Jason had already infiltrated the house. This one, holding a shotgun, demanded that Jason strip, clearly planning to swap lives with him. But this time, Jason refused to surrender and made the first move. Unfortunately, he couldn't gain the upper hand. Suddenly, a muffled gunshot echoed through the room, and a scarred Jason appeared. Seeing Daniela come down the stairs, the scarred Jason lowered his weapon and assured them he meant no harm. He introduced himself as the academic Jason who had invented the metal box. Apologizing for everything, he explained that he had tracked Daniela down using Blair's car, but his own car had been bugged, which was why so many Jasons had shown up. Now, all he wanted was to make amends. He offered his car to loser Jason, urging him to take Daniela and Charlie and leave. Before they parted, he handed back the wedding ring, a symbol of the life he had tried to take. As more Jasons gathered around the property, loser Jason floored the gas pedal, speeding away with his family. Once the danger had passed, Charlie found a package in the back seat. Inside was a box of serum, the ashes of their deceased child, and a phone. The phone contained a message from academic Jason. He explained that he had stumbled upon this world by chance, and seeing another version of himself living a happy life had filled him with both envy and jealousy, leading him to attempt to replace loser Jason. However, it wasn't until he had spent time living that life that he realized his true fear. He had been too afraid to take risks for love. Loser Jason, on the other hand, had embraced the messiness of life and had built something beautiful. Overwhelmed with guilt, academic Jason handed over the serum in hopes that Jason and Daniela would find their perfect world. He believed that after everything they'd been through, they were uniquely suited to find it together. Without realizing it, Jason and his family had arrived at the abandoned factory. Academic Jason was right. The only way out was to leave this world. But as they approached the metal box, they found themselves surrounded by even more Jasons. These were not the violent, aggressive versions they had faced before. These Jasons had seen Daniela's message on the bulletin board, declaring her choice, and they were here to support it. They didn't want to fight. They just wanted to say goodbye to Daniela and Charlie, perhaps because this was the truest form of love. As the three of them slowly walked toward the metal box, many Jasons softly whispered Daniela's name, their voices filled with sorrow. Jason, Daniela, and Charlie stepped inside, closed the door, and began administering the serum. Together, they were about to embark on a journey to a new world. Meanwhile, Ryan, who had been cruelly abandoned by academic Jason, began his own research on the special serum. Though this world was perfect, it wasn't what he wanted. Blair also found renewed confidence, deciding to continue exploring new worlds. The investor Leighton still hadn't found the world he desired, while Amanda, who had remained in the perfect world, was surprised to encounter Ryan, who had just crossed over. With that, Season 1 of this drama comes to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.